Before I get started, I just wanted to say that I hope everyone is weathering their COVID restrictions well. I know these can be trying times for us all as we navigate through these difficult waters, and depending on what country you live in, you might be facing a much more dire situation than others. That said, I think it's important that we don't stress over what we can't change and instead focus on what we can change. We might not be able to do anything to change the situation right now, however, we can always do something to help keep our spirits up, which is why I'm bringing you this video today in hopes that it will do just that. If this video can give you even just the smallest respite from these difficult times, then that would be worth all of the time and effort that it took me to make this. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this edition of North Korean Movie Reviews. Hello everyone, welcome back to North Korean Movie Review's COVID-19 edition. Today, we are looking at somewhat of a unique film for North Korea, and that movie is Chuagi Nore, known in English as Song of Retrospection. Directed by Ryo Ho-san and released in 1986, Song of Retrospection tells the story of a Korean War correspondent and musician who returns to North Korea 3 decades after the war to find the North Korean woman who'd captured him all those years ago, whom he'd fallen in love with. The film begins with our foreign protagonist, who is obviously played by a Korean, known by Mr. Komak, arriving in the country via Air Koryo. He's quickly ushered into a car and driven to a hotel for foreigners in preparation for the upcoming 13th World Festival of Youth and Students that North Korea is hosting. In the next scene, we're introduced to one of our female protagonists, Comrade Yong Chi, who is acting vice president of the Friendship Festival, whom after judging a group of singers, retires to her office where she sees Mr. Komak's picture in the newspaper, causing an avalanche of emotions as she remembers back to when they'd first met. Meanwhile, Mr. Komak is given the usual tour around Pyongyang, observing the Juche Tower among other landmarks with his tour guide, who then accompanies him back to his hotel. Komak remarks at how much Pyongyang has changed since he'd last been here. When asked by his tour guide if he'd been to North Korea before, he remarks that he had, 30 years ago during the war, to write songs about the victory of UN forces there. He remarks that now it's funny that he's here to perform a song about the victory of the North Koreans and presents the sheet music to his tour guide. While she remarks at how amazing the song is, Mr. Komak admits that it isn't entirely his song. Rather, it was originally written by Ra Sol-ju, the Navy operator who'd captured him, and it was later pieced together by his memory. Mr. Komak laments that he had never forgotten Sol-ju and would like to see her again before he presents the song. The tour guide vows to try and find Sol-ju in time and asks for more information about her.
선생님이 소원이 정 그러시다면 우리가 힘자라는 것 글을 찾아보겠습니다. 그분을 찾는 데 도움이 될 만한
We're taken back to the year 1950 during the outbreak of the Korean War, when Mr. Komak and his fellow soldiers are captured by two PPS-43 wielding, oh my, torture me, please! Rasolju and Yong Chi, who quickly usher Mr. Komak and his friend back to their camp after Solju debatably commits a war crime by shooting a surrendered unarmed combatant for attempting to escape. And I say it's debatably a war crime because under the Geneva Conventions, a soldier must give at least one warning to the escapee before using lethal force. Solju gives a verbal order to stop, however, this is done so in Korean, a language a US Army soldier likely wouldn't understand. She then proceeds to spray him with her submachine gun. Therefore, it's potentially a war crime.
용이동, 이놈들을 끌고 내려가시오. 알았습니다.
Back at camp, war crime Solju and her female compatriots fend off a US counterattack. Mr. Komak and his American counterpart are brought before the KPA commander, who asks for the IDs. During which Mr. Komak tells them that he doesn't have one and is not a combatant, but a civilian studying the history of East Asian warfare. After some time, Ra Solju is ordered to return to her brigade HQ along with Mr. Komak and the other prisoner. During the escort, Rasolju gives the two some bread to eat, during which the captured officer suggests to Komak that they try to escape under the guise of going to relieve themselves. However, this fails as the US officer was unaware that Solju knows English. The officer makes one last attempt to escape by pushing Komak off a cliff and bolting for it. Rasolju is quick to react, however, and commits War Crime 2, Electric Boogaloo, by executing him without again giving a proper warning. There's even less of an excuse this time, as we now know that she does speak English fluently. Immediately after killing the officer, she quickly saves Komak from being killed by American F-80 Shooting Stars that are conducting an airstrike on a bridge being used by the KPA. Komak thanks Solju for saving him and says that he understands why nobody can escape from her. Solju replies that women in Korea were raised to be strong during the Japanese occupation as a means to survive.
All of us. 여자들도, 지오는 아이들까지도 원수들에겐. You saw just now. 당신도 방금 저 3인 달구지 2대에 폭탄을 퍼붓던 미국 놈들의 만행을 봤죠?
As the two wait for the bridge to finish being rebuilt, the company commander in charge invites Solju and Komak to their camp for the night to celebrate Kim Il-sung's birthday, because of course that's a holiday even while he's still fucking alive. The two, well technically just Solju, as Komak doesn't exactly have a say here, happily oblige and are treated to a night of food and songs, during which Komak admires their ability to sing and laugh as though their victory was assured in their minds. Eventually, Komak and Solju reach her company headquarters. Command sends Solju on her way, but before she leaves, Mr. Komak goes to speak with her one last time. He thanks her for her hospitality, which is pretty much just not shooting him, and admits that he lied about being a historian, and that he was instead a composer sent to write a victory song for American forces in what was initially thought to be a quick and decisive victory.
유해군의 승리에 대한 소나타를 쓰려고 전선에까지 나왔던 작곡가입니다. 서방계에서는 당신의 나라에서 전쟁이 일어나자 이제 얼마 안 가서 미국의 승리로 인차 끝나는 유쾌한 전쟁이라고들 했습니다.
그래. 당신이 직접 목격하니.
Solju asks what he thinks now that the fortunes of war have turned against the Americans. Komak laments that he can't understand how the Korean people can persevere despite losing so much. Solju replies that it's out of duty to their motherland that they fight, and that individual losses are not important. She turns to leave one last time, and Mr. Komak asks Solju to write the song for him instead about the victory of the Korean people. Solju replies that she will finish it after the war is over and send it to him. She bids Komak farewell and departs again to the front.
헤어지면서 나는 저 고마운 처녀의 내일과 이 나라가 당하게 될 재난이 어쩐지 걱정되었습니다.
We're reintroduced to Komak in the present, telling his tour guide that he never saw her again until a year later in 1951, where she attended a youth festival in East Berlin as part of a delegation representing the fledgling DPRK. After observing them perform at a festival, he runs into Yong Chi and the two happily reminisce. The next day at their hotel, Komak runs into Ra Solju right as they are leaving for Korea. The two happily converse, but only for a short while. When asking why they must leave so soon, Solju replies that she must return to the front and hands him the song he'd asked her to write as a parting gift.
자, 기념으로 받아주세요.
Thanks a lot. 고맙습니다. I will remember you. 난 당신들을 forever. 영원히 잊지 않겠습니다. We're taken back to the present once again, where Komak tells his guide that he was initially doubtful if she's still alive after the United States' counteroffensive against the Chinese in 1952. But after hearing of the total, complete, comprehensive, uncontested, not bullshit, amazing arms victory for the Korean People's Army over the United American aggressors, he knew that she must still be alive. His tour guide assures him that she will do what she can to reunite him so he can shut the fuck up already. Have some closure and stuff. On their way back to the Goryeo Hotel, our tour guide receives word that Yong Chi is on her way to meet Komak the following day after hearing of his arrival. She relays this news to Komak, who is jubilant at the chance to meet her once again. The following day, as promised, Komak is reunited with Yong Chi. The two embrace in the most chaste way possible and quickly head to a cafe to catch up. In between small talk, Yong Chi asks if Komak still has the sheet music Solju gave him back in '51. Komak reveals a note saying that he'd kept it ever since. He hands it to Yong Chi and asks when Solju will be able to finish it. Yong Chi hesitates but laments that it won't be possible. We're taken back to the Korean War, where Solju, along with Yong Hui, Okju, and Yongsuk, walk along the beach, loudly practicing for their debut as a quartet, despite being armed, uniformed combatants in an active combat zone. As one would expect, the group comes under fire by a UN Special Forces team, despite them just announcing that they'd captured them alive. North Korean Blackpink quickly dives for cover and returns fire, but Yongsuk is quickly taken out of the fight by a grease gun, while Okju gets Ted Bundy'd with a knife. Seeing the futility of the situation, Solju orders Yong Hui to retreat while she makes a heroic last stand, mowing down scores of US troops with her PPS-43 before taking a hit to the shoulder. With her fate all but sealed as US troops close in around her, she rises like the Greek goddess of Juche with two RGD-5 grenades, which are anachronistic as the RGD-5 didn't enter service with the USSR until 1954, the year after the Korean War ended. Yong Hui, who is reluctantly retreating, observes the greatly exaggerated blast as Solju sacrifices herself for the glory of Juche Best Korea. Yong Hui hurriedly runs back to observe Solju's miraculously intact, uninjured body despite Osama bin Ladening herself with two grenades, and cries over her loss. We're taken back to the present again, where at the final performance of the Youth Festival, Ri Yong Hui, dressed in her seagull's outfit, tearfully performs the song that Solju had written for Komak, titled, Who Taught Me? It's Kim Il-sung, for those of you wondering. We're met with Yong Hui and Komak enjoying a panoramic view of Pyongyang. Komak laments that Ra Sol-ju was too nice to die when she wasn't committing that as a result the concert he will perform must be dedicated to Kim Il-sung instead of Ra Sol-ju, the girl he'd clearly been obsessed with for 30 years because reasons and Juche and stuff. Yang Hui agrees because of course and states that such an action is a desire of the Korean people, and the film ends with Komak performing his concert, dedicated not to the woman whom he'd so obviously loved, but instead to the tyrant who was ultimately responsible for her death. With a runtime of just over an hour, it's a brisk movie indeed. Nonetheless, this is still a peculiar North Korean film that I have quite a bit to say about. Firstly, it's obvious that this movie's premise is to promote the 13th World Festival of Youth and Students, which North Korea was hosting. For those of you who don't know what that is, the World Festival of Youth and Students is a UN-sponsored event that occurs every 2 to 5 years, and has done so since 1947. The festival's official aim is to promote solidarity, democracy, and anti-imperialism. Predominantly hosted in communist nations, North Korea saw the opportunity to host the 13th festival as a chance to show the entire world how great Kim Il-sung's Korea was, and to flex hard on its southern neighbor, which it continuously lambasts as inferior. North Korea ultimately botched the entire festival, and their attempts to showcase North Korea as superior to South Korea backfired completely when they invited a South Korean woman who bluntly praised South Korea and criticized North Korea live on North Korean television for the whole country to see. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. The point is that the movie is trying to sell hard the idea that North Korea is the shining example of solidarity and anti-imperialism, due to their heroic victory over their Americans in the Korean War. Overall, I found the movie to be enjoyable, but I found the climax to be really, really stupid and full of propaganda, just like Oh Youth. Overall, the movie falls short on some key areas. Like I mentioned before, the movie is very short. So short, in fact, that by the time I was just starting to get to know the characters and develop feelings, it was over, and the whole film kind of suffers as a result. Let's take a look at the characters. Our main protagonist, Komak, is so poorly developed owing to the short runtime that literally all we know about him is how much he wants to plow Solju. We never learn about what country he's exactly supposed to be from. We don't know anything about his past besides the fact that he was sent to write a song about the UN victory. We don't know why he decided to go to musical school, what made him want to go to Korea in the first place. Literally, 90% of his dialogue is just him boasting about how much he loves Ra Sol-ju and how he longs to see her again. He does have a small character arc midway through the film when he observes Sol-ju and the KPA fighting to survive a US airstrike, in which he begins to admire the Korean people's resolve and ultimately switches sides. However, because we know nothing about his ideas or values before this point, as they're never explained, it's not really much of a character arc, especially since this transformation happens in a flashback, with him already being a sympathizer in the present when we first meet him. Overall, he's a very mediocre blank slate that's just used to funnel Juche propaganda about how right the North Koreans were in their fight against US imperialism. Aside from that, he comes off as very creepy, and his affinity for Ra Sol-ju seems very, very one-sided. However, this again could also be blamed on the aforementioned short runtime and North Korea's affinity for racial purity. Our female heroine, Ra Sol-ju, however, is the real star of this film, depicted as a strong, independent woman who don't need no man and leader. She exemplifies the courageous fighting spirit of the Korean people as they fight to take back their country from the aggressors. She is a static character, but still has more depth than Komak. Imposing and disciplined, she is depicted as a stern and deadly woman who is very much capable of, and willing to, kill you if necessary. Never mind those pesky Geneva Conventions on the treatments of prisoners of war, you're gonna need more than soju if you plan to run from Ra Sol-ju. Despite this, she is not unnecessarily hostile towards people and is even friendly towards POWs for whom she offers food and even converses with them. She harbors no ill will towards Komak despite his affiliation with the Americans, and is even glad to see him in Berlin while the war is still raging, even keeping her promise to write him a song and delivering it to him despite the odds of them ever meeting again being slim to none. She even divulges parts of her personal life, like when she talks about having to be strong as an adolescent girl during the Japanese occupation. We learned something about her. We got to know her. She's overall a great character, and I wish that we got to see more of her before her climactic and predictable martyrdom for the sake of Korea. Good character. The supporting characters are mostly bland and used as simple plot devices. That is Komak's tour guide existing simply as someone for Komak to talk to about Ra-Sol-ju. Yong Chi gets a little better treatment, but in the end just serves as someone to relay the news of Sol-ju's death and to perform her song at the end. My one peeve about this film is that there isn't any real emotional connection between Komak and Ra-Sol-ju. It's obvious that Komak is in love with Sol-ju. You don't think of a woman every day for 30 years, attend a festival in fucking Pyongyang just to see her, and ignore your tour guide by not shutting the fuck up about her for 3 days straight, while waiting to perform a piece of music she wrote for you 3 decades ago without being in love with her. Despite this, he never openly admits to having feelings for her. The dialogue sort of skirts around this obvious fact by replacing it with, "She was my best friend," or "I still think of her every day." This is clearly done to avoid making any hints at an interracial relationship between Komak and Sol-ju, as miscegenation is allegedly severely frowned upon in North Korea. The problem with this, despite the clear racist undertones against interracial relationships, is that it deprives the audience of building any attachment to the characters' relationships with each other. When you see how Komak is obviously depicted as being in love with Sol-ju, you naturally expect him to confess his love to her, or at least in hindsight after learning of her death. But no, that never happens. Instead, he makes no admission of his obvious feelings for her and just cries for 5 seconds before deciding to dedicate his performance to Kim Il-sung. People want to see love and romantic tension where love and romantic tension is implied. If you take that away from them, they're going to feel incredibly disappointed, wondering what the hell the point even was to include it if you're not going to go anywhere with it. Like so many other North Korean movies, they have the chance to explore something dynamic and new for the country's cinema, and don't, leading to an overall predictable and mediocre at best movie that we've all seen a dozen times before. The movie, as expected, has a heavy propaganda factor, with the usual themes of Korea's righteous fight against imperialism, self-sacrifice for the state being the ultimate duty for the Korean soldier, and the idea of putting the well-being of the nation before yourself. Nothing profound, and it's the same message we've seen time and time again. Despite this, I did really enjoy the flashback scenes of the Korean War. Seeing a sequel squad of beautiful Korean women all armed with PPS-43s might look like if Asian fanfics was a movie, but seeing them rake down the enemy was enjoyable, both as a sense of female empowerment and as a weapons enthusiast. You can tell that North Korea puts a lot of effort on recreating battle scenes, even down to the last detail, like the correct usage of Northrop F-80 Shooting Stars models during the airstrike. It makes the whole movie all the more immersive when actual research is done to make sure that all the props that are used are of the correct time period, minus the use of RGD-5 grenades, but hey, I'll allow one mistake. All in all, this is a fun little film to watch and enjoy with friends, as its short runtime makes it an easy movie to watch in one sitting. It's just really important not to take these movies seriously. This is a good movie to start with if you've never seen a North Korean movie before, and it's a nice break from the really, really bad films I've reviewed lately. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great day.